Is there I'm asking an honest question. Why? I mean, has there been some rumor that says that Israel is going to nuke Iran?
Here's the thing. I guess the question is again, now there's been a change of status quo.
Hey, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So this clip right here is something you have to see for yourself, because 30 House Democrats just dropped a letter calling on Secretary of State Marco Rubio to come clean about Israel's nuclear arsenal during an active war with Iran, and the panel completely splits over whether the public deserves any answers at all. The liberal host goes head-to-head with a hawkish guest who tries to wave the whole thing off as paranoid nonsense, and the way she calmly takes him apart is something you genuinely need to witness from start to finish. So make sure you stick around all the way through, because the back half of this is where everything boils over. Also, drop a comment and let me know what country or city you are tuning in from today. I love seeing how far this channel reaches, and I read every single one. Alright, enough talking from me. Let's get straight into it.
The demand for more answers on Israel's nuclear arsenal. 30 House Democrats sent a letter to Secretary of State Marco Rubio urging the Trump administration to acknowledge Israel's nuclear program and for more assurances given the ongoing war with Iran. They write, quote, "Congress has a constitutional responsibility to be fully informed about the nuclear balance in the Middle East and the risk of escalation by any party to this conflict, and the administration's planning and contingencies for such scenarios. We do not believe that we have received that information." This is sort of like an open secret. Everybody knows that Israel has nukes. We don't know how many. Is it time for there to be more transparency around that?
Well, it's not up to us. I mean, it's a very interesting story, because we were put in a difficult position by the state of Israel. Some people out there might not know this, but the United States government tried really hard to prevent Israel from having nuclear weapons. It was not in the state and national interests of the United States under the administrations of Dwight Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy and Lyndon Johnson for Israel to have the bomb. The French engaged in a covert operation with Israel to help Israel build its capacity. The French were not straightforward with us about it, and the Israelis were not straightforward with us. By the end of the 60s, you have a new administration that comes into town, and the French have changed their policy, and they're now not selling weapons to Israel anymore. The Israelis come to our government and say, "We'd like to buy F-4s, Phantom bombers." We're willing to do that, but we say to the Israelis, "But you've got to announced that you will never introduce nuclear weapons into the Middle East." Because we were very worried about an arms race in the Middle East. And we were afraid that if the Israelis announced that they had nuclear weapons, the Egyptians would go to the Soviets and say, "Would you give us a nuclear guarantee?" And we'd find ourselves in a Cuban Missile Crisis, but in the Middle East. So the Nixon administration, which, by the way, the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't want Israel to have nuclear weapons. The State Department didn't want them. Really, none of the leaders in that administration wanted them to have nuclear weapons, but they had them. And so the U.S. government came up with this fix, which was basically, don't say to the world that you have them, and don't introduce them. In other words, don't assemble a weapon, and we'll sell you Phantoms. Because the administration was afraid that if they didn't sell Phantoms to Israel, members of Congress who were supportive of Israel would say, why aren't you helping the Israelis out? And the U.S. government didn't want to say, well, we're not helping them because they have nuclear weapons, because we don't do that. You know, we don't talk about the number of nuclear weapons France has. We don't talk about the number of nuclear weapons that the UK has. Those countries announced themselves that they were nuclear powers. So it has never been our policy as a government to tell people about our allies' nuclear arsenals if they don't say it themselves. And we're stuck in this policy because of the Cold War. It's a problem.
You have to understand something before anything else in this story makes sense. The reason 30 House Democrats had to send a letter just to get basic answers tells you everything about how broken oversight has become in this country. The anchor read it straight from the letter, and listen to what they actually wrote. Congress has a constitutional responsibility to be fully informed about the nuclear balance in the Middle East and the risk of escalation by any party to this conflict and the administration's planning and contingencies for such scenarios. We do not believe that we have received that information. Let that sit for a second. 30. Members of Congress are publicly saying they are being kept in the dark about nuclear weapons during an active war. That is not a partisan stunt. That is a constitutional emergency dressed up in polite language. And the people screaming that this is just political theater clearly did not read a single sentence of what was actually written. And here is the part that blows my mind. Tim laid out the historical context and dropped a line that most Americans have never heard in their lives. He said the United States government tried really hard to prevent Israel from having nuclear weapons. That is the part you have to sit with. 3 administrations in a row, Republican and Democrat, actively did not want this to happen. The Joint Chiefs of Staff did not want it. The State Department did not want it. The leadership of the Nixon administration did not want it. But it happened anyway, because a foreign government went around our back with French help and built the program in secret. And what did America do about it? Tim explained the fix perfectly. He said the U.S. government came up with this fix, which was basically, don't say to the world that you have them, and don't introduce them. In other words, don't assemble a weapon and we'll sell you phantoms. A bribe. That is what it was. A diplomatic bribe to keep the secret alive. And we have been carrying that lie for over 50 years.
Now that there is a hot war in the Middle East, does that change the calculus?
How does it advance the interest of the United States to force Israel to cough up this furball when everybody already does it anyway? What's the point?
Especially since the ambiguity, the strategic ambiguity of this between Nixon and Meyer at the time has led to 50 years of a lack of an arms race outside of Israel, right? Egypt does not, to our knowledge, have a bomb. Lebanon, Syria, all these countries did not develop nuclear weapons as a result of us essentially looking the other way.
Yes, but one of the things that has fallen away is our leverage. We've never had a lot of leverage over the state of Israel when it comes to its decisions on national security. They're an independent country. They have different our national interests and their national interests do overlap, but not completely. And Israel, time and again, and it's a Republican and Democratic administrations that have always been faced with this challenge. Israel does what Israel wants to do. And one of the things we haven't done as much of as that we could is, like a good ally who wants Israel to persevere, we haven't used our leverage to say to Israel sometimes, the war you've launched against Hamas deserves it, but the way you're fighting it, it's not good for the international system and it's not good for us. That's what I think is going on here, and it's a good debate to have, not on the nuclear issue, but how can the United States use its leverage to make the Middle East more peaceful?
So here are some of the questions that Joaquin Castro is posing on this issue. Maybe this might answer some of your questions. What nuclear weapons capability does Israel have? Has the administration received any assurances from Israel that nuclear weapons will not be used? Has Israel communicated to the United States any nuclear doctrine, any red lines or thresholds for nuclear use in the context of the current conflict with Iran? Has the administration assessed what circumstances could lead Israel to consider nuclear use? What contingency planning has the administration conducted for such a scenario? I mean, we do. Look.
This is the part that people are missing on purpose. The world we built that policy for does not exist anymore. The Cold War is over. The Soviet Union is gone. And right now, while we are sitting here pretending nothing has changed, there is an actual shooting war happening between the United States, Israel, and Iran. The original justification for the silence is dead, and yet the silence remains. Tim said something that I think most Americans need to internalize. He said one of the things that has fallen away is our leverage. We've never had a lot of leverage over the state of Israel when it comes to its decisions on national security. And then he hit the bullseye when he said, Israel does what Israel wants to do. That is not a critique coming from some random commentator. That is a seasoned foreign policy voice on national television admitting that the relationship has been one-directional for decades. We give. They decide. And when we ask questions, we get nothing back. And here is what nobody on the other side wants to address. Joaquin Castro put real questions on paper. real specific questions. The host read one out loud and it was devastating. Has Israel communicated to the United States any nuclear doctrine, any red lines or thresholds for nuclear use in the context of the current conflict with Iran? Read that again. That is not a hypothetical from a college debate club. That is a sitting congressman asking whether our closest ally in the region has ever told us what would make them push the button during a war we are literally helping to fight. And the silence on the other side of this question is deafening. You have to understand why this matters. When India and Pakistan both developed nuclear weapons, the entire world demanded doctrines, public declarations, command and control disclosures. That is how responsible nuclear states behave. You announce what you have, you announce when you would use it, and you let the world hold you accountable. Strategic ambiguity made sense in 1969. In the middle of an active war in 2026, it is a liability.
Is there I'm asking an honest question. Why? I mean, has there been some rumor that says that Israel is going to nuke Iran?
Here's the thing. I guess the question is, again, now there's been a change of status quo. Mm-hmm. There's a war between the United States, Israel, and Iran that is going on right now in the Middle East. And under those circumstances, that is actually different from what we've been experiencing for the last, 40, 50 years. And so under those circumstances, there's only one power in the Middle East that has a nuke, and it's Israel. And so the question is, what are the circumstances? What are the boundaries? Are there any boundaries? They don't acknowledge that they have them. People know that they do, but are there any boundaries? And I think that seems like a fair question to ask.
I'm assuming that they're in executive session. The Armed Services Committee and the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and certainly the intelligence community are getting as much of a briefing on the state of Israeli nuclear readiness as they feel they need. The issue here is whether it should be done publicly.
Well, are they? Because I presume that the reason that they've released this letter is because they're not.
So I think that's the question.
This is not about national. This is just political.
No, but this is a question. Should they be doing should they be doing a briefing of some sort to members of Congress? I don't think that is unreasonable at this point. And that letter made it seem like they actually don't have the answers to the questions. And to be honest with you, I think what worries Congress and the Democratic members is I don't know if the White House has asked themselves those questions. And so I think that is the concern, is that has the White House done their homework? Do they know the answers to these questions? And if they do, can they do a classified briefing?
Oh my God, the moment the conservative guest opened his mouth and said, has there been some rumor that says that Israel is going to nuke Iran? That was the mask coming completely off, because that tells you exactly how the hawks want this conversation to go. They want to make you feel paranoid for even asking. They want to frame 30 members of Congress as conspiracy theorists for doing the most basic job in their job description. That sneer, that dismissive tone, that is the entire defense. There's no substance behind it. And watch what happens next. The liberal host does not yell, does not get rattled, just calmly lays out reality. There's only one power in the Middle East that has a nuke, and it's Israel. One sentence. That is all it took to end the entire conservative argument. Because once you say that out loud, the question is not paranoid anymore. The question is obvious. What are the boundaries? Are there any boundaries? And the honest answer right now is that nobody outside a tiny circle of officials has any idea. And then comes the closer that should make every single American sit up straight. The host asked the question that nobody in the administration wants to answer. Has the White House done their homework? Do they know the answers to these questions? Think about what that means. We are in an active war. There is a nuclear power in the region. And the worry for members of Congress is not just that they are not being told. The worry is that the people in charge might not even know themselves. That is the scary part, not the existence of weapons, the possibility that the adults in the room never bother to ask what the rules are. History gives us a perfect example. During the Cuban Missile Crisis, John F. Kennedy demanded constant updates and redline clarity hour by hour. That is how you handle a nuclear standoff. You ask the questions. You demand the answers. You do not roll your eyes at the people asking them. The Democrats in this letter are not the problem. The people mocking the letter are. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.